Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked Fly Fly Fishing. And in my last video, I talked about modifying fly lines, and I referred to this modification that I did on a Velocity 5-weight, clear intermediate, and I put a floating running line on it. And I thought, you know what, it'd be a good idea if I, referred to this original Velocity line and demonstrate what I really did with it. I'm not going to actually weld it up, but I'll show you graphically the steps that I went through to turn it into a intermediate line with a floating belly. I also did exactly the same thing with the trout line in the level 3, no, I should say level 3, weight forward 5 sinking line. Level type 3 is what I'm trying to say. So I did that as well with this. I put a floating, you can see the orange on here. It's a floating running line that I attached to the sinking head. So what did I actually do? So I've got a little bit of footage here of me fishing, and I want to just sort of play it a little bit so you can see my thinking process as I was actually fishing, of way I was looking at this line. You see, I'm just stripping it back and just doing a single spade to put it back out again. At this point, I'm just casting short.
The line I got on here is a little bit interesting. It's a clear intermediate. It's an Airflo Velocity clear intermediate. It's only available in a 5-weight and up, not in a 4. And the other thing with Velocity is it had a sinking running line, the intermediate running line as well as an intermediate belly, which is not very good in a river situation, because in a river your running line ends up sinking and catching on the bottom and gets really ugly.
I'm referring to the fact that when I'm fishing, if I have an intermediate running line and I'm stripping it down, I'm stripping in like I would when I'm stripping for streamers, that running line can sink, especially if you're standing in relatively slow water, and it snags up on everything that's on the bottom and you end up covered in moss. And the other problem, which I don't talk about here, is when you go to make your cast, trying to get the cast to lift that line out of the water becomes a big problem, and you don't get a good cast off at all.
So you can see my running line is yellow, and what I've done is I've welded on some floating running line. Something else I've done with the Velocity, it has a long rear taper and a short front taper.
Now this is a beginner's line that Airflo used to put out. It's discontinued now. So this particular profile, it was considered a good profile for beginners. It was a little bit overweight, and it was easy to cast, but it wasn't a great distance solution in this particular format when you're putting it on a 5-weight rod. And I'll talk about this in a moment. This becomes a lot better distance solution on a 4-weight when you flip it around.
The belly is really all at the front end of the head. That's not very good for spey casting. So what I've done is I've reversed the tapers. So what was the rear is now the front, and vice versa. Now this thing spey casts actually quite well, and it overhead cast as well to boot. But for distance casting, oh, I got one. For distance casting, this is a great combination.
So I put this line, which was a 5-weight, and I flipped it around and put it on a 4-weight so I could use it as a spey line, casting streamers, and also overhead casting for distance, because it will load a 4-weight more deeply. You're able to get better distance out of it than you would if you put this line on a 5-weight, because you pretty well run out of gas with this line, because it wasn't designed to cast for distance. It was designed to be easy for beginners to cast. So when you got the full head out, it didn't have a lot of weight behind it, and it didn't go very far, but on a 4-weight it does.
Lovely feisty brown to start the day right off the bat. Here we go.
Okay, this is what the Airflo Velocity clear intermediate, this one here, looks like right out of the box. It's all intermediate. It's got a mono core. It's clear, and as I say, the running line sinks. So my first step was to remove the running line. So I have just the head only. And I was going to work with that. In fact, the running line is still sitting here in that spool. And then what I did was I flipped the head around. So the rear taper is now the front taper. And you can see it looks like an Airflo Delta taper, doesn't it? It really is. It's an Airflo Delta at this stage of game. And now I weld on the yellow running line, and I've got an equivalent, a lightweight version of an Airflo 40 Plus, basically, in a lighter weight that will work well on a 4-weight rod. Work like a charm. And as I say, I've also got this one, which I did with the level. Sorry, I keep saying level. My Type 3 full sinker. You don't want a full sinking running line, that's for sure, when you're standing in water. Okay off a boat, okay with a stripping basket, not okay when you're standing in water. So as a consequence, I put a floating running line, the orange one, as you can see, works like a charm. So that's how I handle the Velocity. And as I say, the point of me showing you this is the idea, be creative with it. You've got a line with a short rear taper and a long front taper. If you flip it around, it's a bass bug. You flip it the other way, it's trout line. So you can play games with this as much as you want. Change the type of running line that you put on there. Maybe your running line's too thick and you want a thin one. Perhaps you want to change the color of the running line. Maybe it's all one color. Your line's all one color and you want a different color running line. All the different things you can do when you start to weld lines and you're not afraid to take scissors to a line and do things to it. So anyway, give that some thought. I mean, it works like a charm, and this is my regular 4-weight intermediate line. So give it a try. Cheers.